Hey, Jake, thank you for joining today on our first ever Do Not Flush podcast, where I'm kind of trying to come up with a podcast that talks about things that, people don't normally talk about or should be talking about, novel ideas kind of, I feel like everything's kind of gotten to a point now where everything's kind of just mainstream monotoned, and I feel like there's more things that, when I'm talking with friends or family or colleagues at work, we're talking about new things and ideas that just don't come up. You don't see anyone discussing it, and I feel like maybe we should. And it could be anything from new business ideas, or different ways of conducting business, different ways of conducting yourself professionally at work. It could be lessons from novel places that we don't think about, but actually could be applied in a business perspective. In your case today, we're gonna be talking about like how you military experience can translate to professional setting, but we're gonna be shedding a bit more light, I believe, on it than maybe what has been done in the past. At least I hope so. And the thinking is that this is, that coupled with various other aspects of um, uh, what we see today. And I feel like we need to add a bit more color, a bit more contrast than just the, left and right, and just kind of add a bit of what's in between, you know what I mean? And give a voice to the folks that just want to say, well, I can see both sides, but here's my take on things. Versus just you're either in one camp or another, regardless of what the topic is. And I think, these voices should also be heard. And so again, thank you today for joining. So we have Jake with us. He has been your Coast Guard for several years, an honor guard, uh, served for many years, and had I'm sure you have a lot of things to share, experiences to share with us today, and currently intact. So yes, I'll let you kind of a bit more of a better introduction. Go ahead.
Yeah. So thank you for having me. My name is Jake Wilkie. I was in the Coast Guard, the United States Coast Guard, from January of 2011 till April of 2017. I was medically retired from the military because I had a shoulder injury. Had to get a couple surgeries done on my arm, but I got out in 2017. When I got out, I actually used my GI Bill to go back to school. I went to George Mason University for Information Systems and Operations Management. Um, Graduated from there, and I got picked up by SAS here in Cary, which they're a data analytics organization. I'm a technical consultant there. So what I typically do is I do the software deployments with customers ranging from governments to banks, kind of the full gamut, and everyone in between there. But yeah, I've been doing that since 2021.
Oh wow! And what can you tell us a bit more about what you did in the Coast Guard? So what your position to do? Were you the guy that kind of got to go full throttle and on the boat? Uh,
So my military career was pretty unique, I think. My first 2 years, I was part of the Ceremonial Honor Guard, which they do ceremonies with the president, foreign dignitaries, things like that. And we also did burials at Arlington National Cemetery, and then burials for prior service members throughout the United States. Um, Once I was done with that, that's a 2-year billet. From there, I was Coast Guard Police up in Pasadena, Maryland, which it was kind of funny when I saw my orders. I just saw Pasadena and I was like, oh, I'm going to California. Nope. Nope, going up to Maryland. Um, and then after that, I was on a buoy tender, which they're the ones that they're the black holes. They're the ones that go out in the middle of the ocean and they service the buoys that are out there. It's a 225-foot Coast Guard cutter.
wow.
And I was the master helmsman.
Oh, that was
So I got to drive the boat,
oh, man.
which was pretty fun. And
Is it always imagined, watching Star Trek when I was a kid, and later on in life, that it's kind of built off the Navy or the Coast Guard. How close are they to each other in terms of like
it's
the
it's pretty close.
yeah.
Unfortunately, my boat wasn't fast enough to go as fast as the Enterprise, but no, the bridge is very closely to what you see
Oh,
on
that's
stars like Star Trek or something like that. But it's it's a very unique environment. There's a lot of things going on, and when you're focused on driving the boat, it's a little interesting.
So is that the reason why they have different roles? Because everybody is kind of focused on just one thing versus kind of,
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, so my job, I was obviously just taking commands from whoever the officer on deck that was, taking commands of directions, where to go, and stuff like that. And then we had a navigator. We had another guy that just kind of looking out, making sure nobody was gonna do anything, cut in front of us or anything.
and just to give the kind of the audience an idea, like how big is this boat? Like, or how many feet?
225 feet.
225 feet. How fast does it go? That's
It didn't go that fast, unfortunately. There was one time. So every once in a while, you'll have buoys that break off their moorings. So like the chain will break, and so they just start floating out, and you have to go chase them down. For there was a split moment in time there where that buoy was outrunning us. But no, it got up pretty quick. I don't know what the fastest we ever got it up to, but it could move some weight around.
was it scary to have to be responsible for literally kind of navigating something so big with so many lives on board? I mean, I would imagine this is no different than maybe a pilot on a plane.
Yeah. The first couple times, it's a little scary, I'll admit. But then you just do it. It's such repetition, it just becomes second nature. But the interesting thing with a master helmsman compared to just like a regular helmsman, so when you're driving the boat, you're given a order of basically where you want to be, like where they want to steer the ship. Regular helmsman, I think it's 5 degrees of separation. So if I'm on bearing 135, I can have 5 degrees left, 5 degrees right, just of slippage.
Okay.
But as a master helmsman, you have 2 degrees.
Ah.
So it doesn't matter what type of weather it is, you are sticking at 2 degrees. So master helmsmen are typically the ones that are actually like bringing the boat um, to moor up, going in and out of shipping lanes and stuff like that. So yeah.
Very nice. Any unique stories that you can share? Like something like the ordinary that you experienced as a helmsman, or
So so when I got my master helmsman, um, I was ice breaking on the Hudson River.
wow.
That was kind of my test to see if I could be a master helmsman. So getting to break ice up the Hudson, that was really interesting. Driven through a couple storms that got a little scary there at points where you're just kind of looking up at a wave. Didn't know that was going to happen.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
It was that big of a wave.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. That just it says a lot more about your how you can handle pressure. Which I think, yes, probably one of the things you were able to translate going into civilian life in the tech world.
Yeah, absolutely. You kind of build up your nerves a little bit
Yeah.
once you're doing stuff like that, and just I don't know, like the pressure doesn't really seem to get to you after a while. Like, of course, every situation that you're in the business world has its own unique challenges, but like I always have this thing in the back of my mind where it's like, well, at least I'm not driving through a hurricane right now. But
Fair enough. Can you share a bit more stories about your time in the honor guard?
yeah, so I was part of the ceremonial honor guard from 2011 to 2013. Um, and as I said, that's where we did ceremonies with presidents, foreign dignitaries. I was part of Obama's second inauguration. We were doing the marching with him after the inauguration, and doing the burials at Arlington. Um, it's a unique experience being part of the honor guard because you go from boot camp to essentially another boot camp. You go through training, and it's a self-paced training that you go through, but basically they teach you how to hold yourself to a different standard. The motto of the honor guard is pride, poise, perfection, and that's something that I've held on to. I try to live my life that way. Like I want to be proud in what I do. I want to show poise under pressure. But the third thing, perfection, is something you'll never achieve. You are never going to be perfect. Every ceremony we ever did, there was something that went wrong.
Really?
But
Interesting. But we don't from the normal person looking at it.
yeah, you'll never know.
Yeah, they'll never know. But
You'll never.
interesting.
But it always gives you something to chase. that perfection.
I like that. I always think that perfection is something you should strive to achieve, but know that you could never achieve it, but be okay knowing that you can never achieve it. I think
Yeah.
that every time you always find something in you to accomplish. Oh, and how would you? I mean, you know, else would you describe kind of that experience? Did it have its ups and downs?
Yeah, it definitely it gets to you a little bit after a while where you're doing a consistent number of funerals every week. You kind of get numb to it a little bit, but it sticks with you. It's something that I've always just personally kind of held on to it a little bit. Um, but yeah, it was an experience that I'm very thankful for. I think it taught me a lot about myself and kind of the reasons why I decided to join the military. I got to do a lot of really unique things while I was in the honor guard. Getting to travel to Alaska, uh, travel pretty much everywhere around the U.S., just doing different ceremonies or unfortunate funerals. Um, but it's a unique place to be.
How many funerals are we talking about, if you don't mind me asking?
198.
Wow, that's
But that's not just from the honor guard. I did a lot while I was at the honor guard, but because I was in the honor guard, every unit that I went to afterwards, it was if there was a local funeral for a prior service member or something like that, it was like people would call the base asking like how to get military honors and stuff like that.
so folks that have served in the past,
Yes.
have
Yeah.
lived a long life,
Mhm.
and
Yeah. So it would pretty much fall to me to do some of those funerals, but I don't know. It was kind of a unique thing. After I was done with the honor guard, I was like, I don't know if I want to do any more stuff like that. I kind of want to take a break. So I was typically training people on how to do these funerals and stuff. And then it would just get to that point of where it wasn't quite there, like it wasn't honed yet because they hadn't done it as many times as I did. So it would just turned into, okay, I'll just do it. I'll do these ceremonies and stuff like that. But yeah.
well, first off, before I forget, thank you for your service.
Yeah.
It's definitely something that's I can't imagine how difficult it is to go through all those ceremonies, the funerals, and also to be able to be stationed when you were in the Coast Guard and being on a boat with. It's not like just another day in the office. Every day is different, and some days you're apparently facing waves that are 10 feet tall. Um, that's something. That's just something about your character, about who you are, and we definitely appreciate it, and I appreciate you again for that service. You did mention a few interesting stories here about the. Tell me again about the White House lawn incident. I think that was an interesting one.
So, as I mentioned before, there was a training process when you get to the honor guard. And while you're in that training, you have to do what we called stands. I forget the exact number, but I think it was like a handful of 30-minute stands, a couple 45s. You had 2 hour long stands and then one 90-minute stand.
Okay.
And that's literally you're just in your full regalia and you're standing still.
This is like the guys in the UK and London. You see them with the big funny hats.
Yes,
Okay.
very, very similar to that.
Yeah.
So we were at the White House. I want to say it was the Chancellor of Germany that was coming in.
Okay.
And so we're standing on the White House lawn. And one of the kids kids, he was a grown man. Uh, One of the guys that was still in the training process, we were kind of low on numbers at that point in time. I think we were only about like 40, maybe 50 of us. During times of inauguration, we beef those numbers up because we need a lot of people. But so he was still in training, but we needed an extra body. So they pulled him up so he could be part of the ceremony and all that. And he's standing.
Okay.
He was right next to me.
Okay.
And so we're standing there, and it had been raining horribly bad all morning. And so we have our full uniforms on, but we also have these rain jackets that we put on over top of them. So right as we're getting off the bus, it stops raining. And we're like, should we take these off? But we just didn't have time. So we just went and we were standing on the White House lawn. And it turned into the most gorgeous day you have ever seen, and the temperature just kept going up and up and up,
Oh,
and we're standing in direct sunlight, and I feel him kinda, like, wavering a little bit next to me, and one thing you're not supposed to do, you're not supposed to try and catch anybody, you're not supposed to do anything,
really?
you're just supposed to stand there and let it happen. I just felt horrible for this guy, and so I reached out to try and grab him, and it was fingertips away. I missed him by that much. And of course, the newspaper, the picture that they put on the paper, the front page of the next morning is him laying on his back on the White House lawn.
Oh, man.
I felt so bad for the guy. I mean, he didn't get in any trouble or anything. It was completely understandable. Like, but yeah, that happens every once in a while. We call it flaking,
Okay.
passing out, and it's happened to a lot of people in pretty intense situations.
Whatever happened, do you know if he got to be stationed in that position again or?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh,
He finished training a couple weeks later. But yeah,
and what about the, tell us more of the interactions with different branches of the military. I think you told me a story about the, you didn't give me too much on it. You said you're gonna wait for the podcast, but, the, prison bus breakdown.
yes. So every military branch has their own honor guard. And we all do the funerals at Arlington and some of the joint service stuff we do with them. But the bus that we would take to get to Arlington, because where we were stationed, it was a couple miles away in Northern Virginia. This bus, I'm pretty sure, was a prison bus. We always called it the prison bus, and it looked like a prison bus.
So white with,
Yep.
yeah, well, bar, all that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Didn't have bars on the windows. I think they took that off.
Okay.
But yeah, it was just an older bus, and this thing, every time you turned it on, you were like, "Oh, is this the day it's not going to start?" So we pull in to Arlington. We would go through Fort Myer because that base is connected to it, and right when we get into Arlington, thing shuts down.
Shoot.
It just putters off, and we just pull off to the side, and we're like, we have to be on the other side of Arlington for this funeral. What are we gonna do? And then just it happens to be like the Air Force Honor Guard. Their bus was pulling around the corner, and so we waved them down, and we are like, "Is there any way you guys can just get us to the other side of Arlington?" So their honor guard piles out of the bus. We pile on, and it was like going from the prison bus to first class.
Wow.
They had like TV screens in the headrest. They had like little tables that would unfold and like you could eat your lunch on. It was insane.
I've going through business school. I remember a bunch of my classmates were different various branches of the military. They always said the Air Force had like the coolest stuff.
Oh yeah, they got the best stuff.
I mean, I was always attracted to the Air Force because I always felt like they had the coolest technology. But so this is the norm. So this is not just a one-off.
Right? Yeah. No, they got the best stuff. And now they got the Space Force, which
Ah.
I'm just gonna say it. The fact that they're not wearing Star Trek uniforms is kind of a miss for me.
Right, I know the logo kind of looks like it, right? Yeah, like the Federation thing of so or Starfleet. But I think that would be cool. Yeah, that would be awesome.
Nobody wants to be a red shirt though.
No, never know now with Elon Musk. He might be like, we need to because remember when he showcased the new robo taxi, he's like, it's time for the future to look like the future. Maybe he might, whisper in Trump's ear, but like, we need to upgrade the uniforms, be more like Star Trek.
Right?
Yeah, that'd be cool. So, so now we've kind of, have a good understanding of your background, right? Of, and the discipline and required to go through it, the sacrifice that you had to undergo, and the pressure that you had to kind of be able to work with.
Mhm.
How do you say? Can you tell us more like how you went, how you transitioned to civilian life? What was that journey like? And let's try to shed some light on some things that maybe might not be as talked about. And
Yeah. So like I said before, when I got out of the military, I was medically retired because of my shoulder injury.
what happened there?
So there was a piece of my shoulder bone that was actually cutting into my rotator cuff. So every time I was moving my arm or doing anything, it was kind of shaving into my rotator cuff. So they went in, they did I believe it's called a debridement. So they took that piece of bone out. But the problem was I still wasn't really having feeling in my left hand. So they they sat me down and they're like, okay, so we can move your ulnar nerve, which is in your elbow. We can move that over and try and give like room, possibly give feeling in your hand back. And they're like, this is a 50-50 shot. We don't know if it's going to work or not. And so they did that. Every once in a while, I would get feeling back, but it wasn't 100% there. Um, and so I was medically retired in 2017. And then I went back to school. So I used my GI Bill, which I'm very thankful for having that. It was definitely a big help. But it was interesting being a civilian again.
Hmm.
Because one of the things that the military does, like when you're in boot camp, they pretty much rewire your brain to
Okay.
be very focused on the mission and focused on the job and doing what you need to do to get things done, essentially. So kind of being outside of that structure of the military, it was a little bit of a learning experience for me. I know that some people just hit the ground running and they're back in civilian life and it's like, oh, hey, this is great. Others, it takes some time to just get used to it. Um, I feel very fortunate that I did go back to school and it wasn't just me just right into the workforce because I did get to learn kind of how to be a civilian again. Um, but that military structure is what really helped me get through school. Um, I got 1 B plus the entire time I was in, and I was very frustrated with that B plus, but it was just the focus. Like my mission was to get my degree, and I was so laser focused on that, and just the training that I got in the military to set a goal, achieve that goal, and doing whatever is necessary to get there. I think it really did help me.
Okay.
And it's also something that's helped me in my professional life as well. Setting these goals and saying, "Okay, I'm going to do whatever it is I have to get the job done."
So you were talking about before the break on transitioning from military to civilian, how the military can give you the structure, you're mission focused, and which is obviously things that will definitely translate into kind of civilian or corporate life. My question to you is though, do you feel like has that kind of been has it limited you in a way, or has it been, or has there been the need to strike a balance between when to kind of, hey, listen, I'm gonna, I have to. These are my manager said I have to do X, Y, Z. This is how I need to do it, and verse saying where there's sometimes we're like, you know what, I think there's a different way of doing things. I think there's a more efficient way of achieving task A or task B that might not be what is or was requested by my manager. Have you found that your kind of military um, way of conducting yourself has made you say, "No, I'm just going to stick with whatever my manager has said," or have you been able to kind of find your inner contrarian to say, "No, I think this is the better way of doing it." This might not have been the case in the military because you have to follow orders, or orders I would imagine save lives because you don't have you're not privy to all the information, so you have to follow orders. I get that. But in corporate life, I think there's a bit of it's in a lot of cases we see that some of the latest innovation have come from folks that said, I think there's a different way of doing things. How do you strike a balance there, and has there been need to strike a balance?
Yeah, so it's definitely interesting because in the military, you kind of always hear, "Well, it's always been done this way. Like
Okay.
this is how we do things." And I've always been one of those people that, even while I was in the military, I always said to myself, "There's more than one way to attack a problem. Like you can make it better. It shouldn't just always be the exact same thing. Like you should always be thinking of ways to expedite the process, make it cheaper, make it better." So there were a few times in the military where I had to bite my tongue, saying, "Well, there's a better way to do this," but but no, especially with what I do now, I'm very thankful personally for the management that I do have because the end result is just providing the software to the customer, make sure that it's up and running, no issues. But the way that you go about deploying it or the way you go about solving problems, they give you free reign to attack the problem in different ways, which is something that I've always liked, I've always wanted. So I'm very appreciative of having that. Um, but yeah, I never like it when you hear it's always been done this way. You you have to try and make things better, at least from my perspective.
So continue to tell us then more about like, so you went back to school, you found that was a great way to transition back to civilian life. So you think that's a good step for all folks that are, finishing, completing their service years to say, let's go back to school as a good way to transition back to civilian life?
I mean, it worked for me.
Oh,
The most important thing is realizing that everybody's journey is going to be different. Like some people might take advantage of the resources they have while they're still in the service, because you can use tuition assistance while you're in to pay for school. So you could just go straight into the workforce. For me, it was so when I enlisted, I was actually in college at the time, and it was just one of those things that at the time school wasn't right for me. I needed a change. I needed something different. So that's why I enlisted in the military. And then when I was getting out, I went back to school. So it was kind of like picking up where I left off. And it was something that it was familiar to me, because going to classes, working on projects or deadlines and things like that. So I don't want to say that that should be everybody's path because, like I said, everybody's different. But it was definitely an easy way for me to transition, kind of picking up where I left off.
gotcha. All right. And how has can you tell us more about what you do right now for SAS, and how has that been? How was the, uh, you know, once you started, what was that like, and how is it going so far?
Yeah. So what I do at SAS, I'm a technical consultant where I do software deployments with using Kubernetes containers. We deploy software on some of the big infrastructure, so AWS, Azure, Google, things like that, which is very far from what my degree
Yeah.
is in. With my degree program, it was more meant to be on like the project management side. But when I got picked up at SAS, we go through what's called the SAS Academy process, which is about 3 months, if I'm remembering correctly. Feels like forever ago. But basically, the academy process is you learn different facets of SaaS, generating reports using customer data, deploying software, writing SaaS code to analyze the data, things like that. And what they do is like you do presentations after you go through this learning cycle of certain sections. You do presentations, and what they try to do is they try and put you in like the best fit for where like your skills are, where they think you would do best. And for me, it was deploying the software. Um, I just had an aptitude for it, for figuring out how to make things work. It was a process. It was definitely a lot of bumps, a lot of long nights trying to figure it out. But
So I'm curious, what would you say? How has your Coast Guard experience? What obstacles did it present when you started working at SAS, and what opportunities did it present when you were working at SAS?
so I think one of the biggest things for me, especially transitioning into a position that I didn't really have much experience with, I had to remind myself, it's like, yes, this is a little bit scary. Yes, it's a learning process, but you've done this before. You've gone to different units, you've picked up different things, different jobs, how to do things. Um, and it's just having that mindset of you've done this before. Might not be this exact thing, but you can learn this.
Mm,
This is a skill you can learn.
beautiful. And self-confidence.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what have you think, because of because of the kind of your military experience, maybe it was an obstacle in sense of, you were used to doing things a certain way, but now you have to do it differently.
Yes.
What can you give us an example or of like, this is something that you had to rewire your brain on how to do things differently now that maybe somebody else says, just do it the typical, hey, you finished high school, went to college, or went straight to the workforce, might not have that obstacle. What are those obstacles? I want to try to uncover some of the things that are unique to your situation and those going through similar situation as do what to expect and how to go about it.
Yeah, so I think the one for me is being so regimented. Like in the military, if you got an email from your higher up, it was pretty much expected, okay, a response now. Or if you're given a task, results now.
Okay.
Um, one thing I've found in the civilian side is it's not always so immediate. You're not necessarily
Really?
like it like the email thing. That was the hardest thing for me because like I'm able to stop and think about the response a little bit more. It's like you're not expected to give that response immediately unless it's a certain project or something going on. But it's like just take a second, think about how you want to respond, and then write the response.
It's interesting you say that because I would venture to say that a lot of folks in the corporate world would say that this is exactly what they would expect their managers to expect an immediate response, and we see countries like I think several countries in Europe where like the manager can't email their employees after like 6 or 7 p.m. because that's the expectation that as an employee you need to be responding immediately. But
Mm.
you're telling me that this is actually there's more leeway here than it is in the military. I think is wow.
Well, that's just my perspective.
Okay.
Um, like I said, my management is fantastic. They let you do things the way you want to do them, essentially. And I've found that, uh, especially working in different sectors, it's a lot of hurry up and wait every once in a while. Where it's like, okay, we're waiting on this, and then it's like, okay, we're still waiting on this. So that's something that it has good and bad, I feel like, because I'm used to just that immediacy. So certain things I would like to see that immediacy, but in others, it's like, okay, just think about it.
Gotcha. And how has tell me more about you mentioned your injury. Has your arm gotten better? What was it like? What was that? I'm assuming you went to the VA. How was that experience there?
So I actually kind of just let it linger for longer than I probably should have.
Okay.
Um, I was doing the physical therapy, but that just wasn't really working. And then when I got out of the military, I kind of just separated myself from the VA or anything like that.
Hmm.
Because I don't know, I had it in my head for so long. It's like, okay, well, the damage is done. They couldn't fix it. Why go back? So I just separated myself from the VA. And then when I started working at SAS, the medical insurance that we have there is great. And I went back to physical therapy at Duke, and they were amazing. It, I used to live in pain constantly.
Oh,
Um, and now that they've taught me how to do certain exercises to help with the pain, it's alleviated some of that pain, which is life changer.
interesting. So that's I think a good message that there's could be options to not to assume that things are as they are. They could change, and especially with medical advancements and whatnot.
Yep.
That's I think a good message to send out to folks that might still be suffering from previous injuries
Yeah.
that they're
And the VA, they do have resources. I don't want to say that they don't or say anything ill about the VA. It's just my experience. I wanted to separate from them. I saw that going back to school, getting a job that has health insurance, that there I might be able to get better help for my situation at least.
gotcha. No, agreed. Yeah, there's. I mean, I think it's normal in all medical professions. They say always get a second opinion.
Yep.
So I think that's the standard, regardless of who the provider or healthcare
Right.
provider is. So I don't think that's unreasonable to say or expect. So you know, I think one of my last kind of maybe questions I would ask, or two questions. One is if you got to go back, would there be anything you change?
No, nothing.
No.
Because I was lucky enough to meet my wife while I was in the military. And if one thing had changed, we might never have met each other. So if I had to go do it all again, I would absolutely do it in a heartbeat.
That's good. So, I mean, so both you and your wife were in the Coast Guard.
Yes,
Would you,
I drove the boat. She fixed it.
would you recommend, then would you kind of, know that, if in the future, one of your kids once said, "Hey, listen, I want to go to the Coast Guard," how would you feel about that?
It's their decision. For me, it was a very personal decision. I had always strived to help people. And so the Coast Guard just seemed like a natural fit for me. I think anybody in joining the military, it's a personal decision. You have to be doing it for whatever reason you see is if it's getting out of the area you're in, starting a different life, getting yourself on a different path, then I'd say do it. But I can't imagine me sitting in front of my son saying, "Oh no, you're not doing it," or something like that. I mean, he's 18, he's his own man. He can make his own decisions, and I'm going to support him and love him regardless.
That's beautiful. And what would you say, kind of, if you had to, like, one or top lesson that you, or top one or two lessons that you got to experience from going from military to civilian life that you would want to share with folks that are maybe are in the same journey or just a few years behind you? What advice would you give them, kind of, and what kind of call to action would you give them?
Keep moving forward.
Okay.
There's nothing's ever going to be perfect in life. The transition out of the military, or even going into the military throughout your service, or even when you're getting out and you're going back to school and starting the workforce, things will go wrong. Nothing's going to be perfect by any stretch of the imagination. It's just keep moving forward. Don't get bogged down in the little things. Just have one driving goal and get there. If you want to be a chief, like in the Navy or Coast Guard, then go get your anchors, become a chief, do what you have to do. But also understand you have resources. Everybody has somebody in their corner. So in the military, it's a brotherhood. You find people that you stick with them. Like my best friend in the world, Devin. He's I met him while I was in the honor guard, and I just can't imagine life without him. But you always have resources. The military, they have people that will help you throughout whatever you're trying to go through. If you want to go back to school, if you want to get your degree, do it. Just keep moving forward.
I love it. It's a great message. Jake, any other thoughts you want to share, before we conclude for the day?
No, I'm just very thankful to be sitting here and talking with them.
I'm honored and thankful for having you here, and for the first episode. This is great and a good message. And thank you, audience, for the folks that continue to listen. Very appreciative of it. We'd love to hear more. Please don't shy away from leaving comments, thoughts, and what else you'd like to see or hear. And thank you. Thanks, Derek. Appreciate it. Take care.
Go.